Hey, good morning, church. I'm Lucas McGrew. I'm the youth pastor here at the church, and this is
Sam Potter. I'm the high school director here.
And we are going to be reading the scripture this morning. We're in the book of Ecclesiastes, and Danny's going to be preaching the word here this morning. So let me introduce it to you. Ecclesiastes 2, 12 through 26. So I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly. For what can the man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there is more gain in wisdom than in folly, as there is more gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them. Then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool when will happen to me also? Why then have I been so very wise? And I said in my heart that this also is vanity. For of the wise as of the fool there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come all will have been long forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool, so I hated my life, because that is done under the sun was grievous to me. For all is vanity and a striving after wind.
I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will be master of all for which I toiled and used my wisdom under the sun. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave my heart up to despair over all the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. This also is vanity and a great evil. What has a man from all the toil and striving of heart with which he toils beneath the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even in the night his heart does not rest. This also is vanity. There is nothing better for a person than that he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. For apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? For to the one who pleases him, God has given wisdom and knowledge and joy, but to the sinner he has given the business of gathering and collecting, only to give to one who pleases God. This also is vanity and a striving after wind.
Good morning, church family. We are so excited to be here worshiping with you today. Not in the church yet, but we will be soon. My name is Joyce Nelson. This is my husband, Woody Nelson. We've had the privilege of worshiping our Christ on the platform here at First Free for over 10 years. And we moved back from being gone about 20 years from Lincoln, moved back. Took us a couple of years to find a church that we felt was where we needed to be, and that church was First Free. So we've been blessed, so blessed to be here and call this our home and call all of you our friends and our family. So we are excited to worship you with you this morning. Thank you. To the King of glory and light, all praises. To the only giver of life, our Maker. The gates are open wide. We worship you. Come see what love has done. Amazing. He bought us with his blood. Our Savior. The cross has overcome. We worship you.
Shout, Hosanna, Jesus he saves. Shout, Hosanna, he rose from the grave. Come and lift him up, Hosanna.
Now let the lost be found, forgiven. Death could not hold him down. He's risen, so let the saints cry out. We worship you.
Shout, Hosanna, Jesus he saves. Shout, Hosanna, he rose from the grave. Come and lift him up, Hosanna. The same power that rolled the stone away, the same power alive in us today. King Jesus, we call upon your name.
No other name.
The same power that rolled the stone away, the same power alive in us today. King Jesus, we call upon your name.
No other name.
Shout, Hosanna, Jesus he saves. Shout, Hosanna, he rose from the grave. Come and lift him up, Hosanna. Shout, Hosanna, Jesus he saves. Shout, Hosanna, he rose from the grave. Come and lift him up, Hosanna. Come and lift him up, Hosanna. Come and lift him up, Hosanna. Come and lift him up, Hosanna.
Where sin runs deep, your grace is more. Where grace is found is where you are. And where you are, Lord, I am free. Holiness is Christ in me. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour I need you. My one defense, my righteousness. Oh God, how I need you. So teach my song to rise to you when temptation comes my way, and when I cannot stand or fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you. Oh, I need you. Every hour
Pray with me. Lord, you are mighty and you are glorious, and we are grateful. Lord, we live in uncertain times. It's hard to understand, and we have new challenges each day. Lord, we pray for wisdom, but I also want to pray that each of us will recall continuously that you are mighty and you are sovereign and you will provide. Like the lyric said, you are our defense. You are our righteousness. And where grace is found, that's where you are. We thank you for your wonderful grace. Lord, I pray that we will recall this always, and I pray that others will hear and learn and believe that we need you every hour of every day. We need you. I pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.
Well, good morning. My name is Danny Lamont, and I'm one of the pastors here on staff, and excited to be with you this morning. And I want to say this right from the get-go. If you see me kind of looking around and feel like I'm not looking at you, it's because we actually have some people in the room here with us today as we think about and get excited and prepare for just in 2 weeks that we'll begin to slowly and strategically and paced gather in this room. And so there's going to be more information coming out about that, about how to register if you feel comfortable. And for those of you that don't, that maybe you still want to just kind of wait and see, we invite you to continue to be a part of our online community. Because I think the thing that we've learned during this season, a season that for a lot of us we've kind of lamented and we're kind of ready to be over, but I think we've also learned just how good and gracious God is in the ways that he can work in the slowdown and the solitude. That God often speaks in silence, like we're going to talk about today. And maybe for some of us, this season has actually been a sweet one because it's just been a real season of what we've longed for, of just us with God. And so if that's you, if you feel like I'm just not quite ready yet, we want you to know that is okay. That the church isn't just a room gathered in a building, that we are the church, whether we're together or separate. And so while we are excited to gather together in 2 weeks, we're excited just to be with you this morning. And so if you are a guest with us, we want to say welcome to you as well. It's been great to get to know you, whatever platform you're watching through. We would love to get to know you a little bit better. If you'll look at the comments section, you can reach out and we can get a little bit of information of how we can serve you best, how we can be praying for you, or maybe just some information that we can give you. We would love that opportunity. And so with that said, we have been going through a series over the past almost year now, which we celebrated this year 1 year of, or this week, 1 year of us since our visit to Lincoln. Since the first time we flew over this amazing, unbelievable land, saw these green things called corn stalks, and we're like, oh my goodness, what is this place? And then we met these amazing people. And so we have been reflecting on life and what's taken place over the past 12 months, and in that been asking, like, is this real? Because I think that's a question that a lot of us, when we look at life, we're asking that same question, and maybe even in this season, we're asking that more than we ever have before. Because it almost doesn't seem like real life. In fact, even in this room, everybody here is wearing a mask except for me, and in that, is this real life? Or is this Halloween? And so we've been walking through over the past year the Gospel of Luke, and we've gotten to this point where we're taking a pause where Jesus looks at the crowd, looks at his disciples, and says, he who seeks to save his life will lose it. But he who loses his life for my sake will find it. And so we're asking the question, when Jesus speaks about this life, what is he talking about? What is the point of life? Is it exactly what I've assumed it to be? Is it what my parents have told me to be? Is it what generationally we've come to believe? Is it different based on cultures and where we live? Is it different based on being American and not? Is it different based on our color? What is this life that Jesus offers when he says that I've come that they may have life and have it abundantly? Because there have been moments, more often than I want to admit, that life isn't what I thought it would be. And so I'm left with these questions. Have I gone after the wrong things? Am I doing it in the wrong way? What am I missing? Because everyone else seems to kind of have it all put together. Everyone else seems to know what they're doing. Everyone else seems to have one foot in front of the other, and I'm just trying not to fall down. And so, what is it? And so we've been asking that question specifically as we've taken a pause to look at what many biblical scholars have called the truest of all books, the book of Ecclesiastes. And in the book, we find something really interesting. We find this man, Solomon, this king. He's been raised as a prince, and he's now been seated on the throne, that he's been told he can have whatever he wants, and so he prays for wisdom beyond all measure, and he's the wisest, smartest person that's ever lived. But it doesn't just stop there, that he's the king of the most powerful nation and that he's the smartest person. He's also the richest person that's ever lived. As we talked about last week, if you were able to tune in, that he literally gets to a point where he's tired of going and buying flowers. He just plants a forest. That you can go to Israel today and you can see the caverns that are dug out that were filled with water just to water that forest. That he got tired of going and buying wine, so he planted a vineyard. He didn't just have a Spotify account. When he threw a party, he brought bands in. And they weren't these little backyard barbecues. There were 20,000 people in existence, that he had more wives than any man in all of history. Some estimate over 1,000. And so Solomon, by our worldly definitions, has it all. He's a baller. But yet, as we found as we opened this book, he spends the first chapter saying, vanity, vanity, all is vanity. Meaningless. And in that, it kind of cuts to the core of each one of us, because each one of us is going, wait a minute, if everyone else has it going on, I need to pursue those same things, but they're in pursuit as well. They're asking the same questions as well, and we just see it in the tabloids that we read as we stand in the checkout aisle. We see it on the news. We see it via social media. We see all of these celebrities that seem to go from marriage to marriage, from mansion to mansion. Athletes squabbling over more. Politicians arguing over power. And yet, if everybody continues to be after more, the question we have to ask is, when does it end? Isn't there more? And so we go to the Word of God because we've kind of turned everywhere else, and in it, if self-help was the answer, in and of itself, it kind of defeats the purpose, right? Because if I could fix me, I would have already done it by now. And maybe it's not pop culture, because pop culture has me pandering to an ever-changing public, figuring out what's in now, and never feeling in my own skin or in the right place. And then for some of us, we turn to religion only to find a constant reminder of the shame and regret of our past mistakes. And so within Christianity at First Free Church, we want to turn to the Scriptures. Because we're, I guess, at this point where we're willing to admit we've turned everywhere else. And so like the disciples in John 6, after hearing the words of Jesus and not abandoning him, when Jesus says, "Why are you still here?" Kind of Peter almost reluctantly, and you can almost feel him flippantly say, well, where else are we going to go? You have the words of eternal life. And so we want to know God more deeply and be known by him more fully. To experience him in unique ways, to be equipped to live life in the way that he's called us and intended us to live it. And to see that message spread. That's how we define discipleship here. To know God and to be known by him more and more each day. And so we've opened this truest of all books, and it's told us the truth about life, that you can continue to pursue more, but in the more, it's all meaningless. And while that's truthful, it's not encouraging. While that's truthful, it still kind of hurts, and we kind of go like, really? Like, this is the loving God of Christianity. This is the one that calls me to be joyful. Like, this is the exact God that I've kind of, my entire life, kind of grown up going, this is who he is. He wants to take from me, rob from me, punish me. He's just a principal, a dictator. Until I look into the words and life of Jesus and I see something that seems so much different than what I've grown up with. And in that, maybe in the end of finding out that life is meaningless apart from him, I find, like C.S. Lewis, that if that really was the case, C.S. Lewis said this, that if life has no meaning, why did we ever discover that it had no meaning? There has to be more. And so if there's nothing new under the sun, maybe there's something beyond the sun. And so week 2, we look at Solomon and we learn some very interesting things, is that Solomon is almost the anti-church going type, meaning that instead of just pursuing kind of religious piety, kind of pulling himself away and going, look at how holy and self-righteous I can be, that he goes the opposite direction. That he throws parties, that he gets drunk, that he pursues folly in all the ways that you possibly can, that he says that he sets his mind to pursue pleasure and to pursue it at its fullest. I mean, you can imagine if the guy's got over 1,000 wives, if he's got more money than you can ever imagine, if he's got more power than anybody else in the world, and he's smart enough to go after the things he wants to go after and has the means to go after them, these are some epic throwdowns. They put those college glory days in perspective, don't they? They put our backyard barbecue, they put our vacations and our cruises and our beaches and our cabins all in the proper lens. And yet he says, still, it's all meaningless. See, because pleasure, apart from the one who created it, apart from the intent that he put behind it, is meaningless. And so we walked away with this challenge from Robbie Zacharias. He said this. He said, the loneliest moment is when you just experience that which you thought would deliver the ultimate, and it lets you down. In other words, when we take good things and we make them ultimate things, they become empty things. And so we found this, that traditionally our response within religion is don't. Don't drink, don't have fun, don't go do these things. Instead, you need to kind of just pull yourself away. In fact, that cabin that I'm talking about, if you can get it as far up in the mountains as you possibly can, if you can isolate yourself away from everything, if you can just kind of sit and all day do nothing. But that doesn't seem to be the life that Jesus lived. That doesn't seem to be the way that, in fact, when I see Jesus, he's always with people. And people are coming to him and they're walking away free. In fact, they're inviting others. They're saying, you got to come see this guy. You got to come hear what he had to say. You got to come experience what I've experienced because I've encountered someone who knew me in a way that I never knew I could be known. Someone who spoke deep into the heart of all things. Someone who, like Hebrews 4:12 says, the word of God is sharper than any two-edged sword, that it exposes us, cuts us down deep to reveal our heart. But it doesn't cut us in a way that hurts us. It cuts us in a way that heals us, in a way that draws out the poison. And so, the truth of the matter is this, is that God that we've painted as this principal dictator, this one that is out to rob us of all pleasure, that actually when we look at the God of the Bible, he's the exact opposite. That he creates Adam and Eve, it tells us in Genesis, that he places them in the Garden of Eden, this perfect existence with all the most amazing trees, the most amazing sounds, the waves crashing, and Adam and Eve in perfection. And he says, all that you can see is yours. Have you ever thought of God that way? Of God saying, all that I have is yours. See, that's the God of Luke 15, that Jesus, when he tells the story of the prodigal son, we all focus on the son that's gone awry. The one that's squandered his wealth, the one that's pursued prostitutes, the one that finds himself in a trough with his head eating with pigs. And he figures out this way, this speech that he's going to give, that he's going to come back because he comes to the realization that even the servants of my father have a better life than I did. So I'll just come back and I'll just kind of work myself to the bone and I'll tell him all the right things and I'll apologize in all the right ways. And he comes up with this amazing speech, because that's for some of us where we're at, right? Is we've got to this point where we're at the end of ourselves, where we go, there's got to be something else. So maybe I'll try God. And so here's the speech I'm going to give him. Except as the son walks up, as he prepares his speech, God runs to him. And he doesn't just run to him in order to punish him, in order to say to him, what are you doing here? Or here's all the things that you have to do. Or why should I let you in? That instead he runs to him, strips off his own robe, wraps it around him, takes his ring, the king's ring, and puts it on his finger. That he looks at everybody and says, kill the fattened calf. We're throwing a party. But that religious older brother that it says is out in the field working, that as he comes in, he hears the commotion and the crowd, that God's party is loud. And he stands at a distance, frustrated, judging. And the same father that runs to the prodigal son runs to the older brother, comes to him. In that, there's a truth that we all miss, is we all think that maybe we got to figure out a way to get to God, when the essence of the gospel is God's come to us in Jesus. And God the Father stands there and listens to this older brother chastise him for throwing a party. The religious chastising the God of their religion. And the father looks at him in the most gracious words and he says, son, your brother's come home. And all that I have is yours. That's the God of Christianity. Not one that denies our pleasure, one that informs it and encourages it, and in the end says, I'm the ultimate party planner. That all of this is foreshadowing to this ultimate gathering for all of eternity, where all of eternity will be a huge, unbelievable celebration. When we gather in 2 weeks, it's not that we're gathering in some building to conduct some service, to sing some songs, and to make sure that we open a dusty old book. We're gathering to celebrate as a glimpse of what is to come. That's why we gather, not because the building is special, but because the God of our faith is special. And so, we now go to the second half of Ecclesiastes 2, and if you're going, oh my goodness, we're just getting into the scripture, I promise I'm going to be quick this morning, all right? It says this, Solomon says, so I turned to consider wisdom and madness and folly, for what can man do who comes after the king? Only what has already been done. Then I saw that there's more to gain in wisdom than in folly. There's more to gain in light than in darkness. The wise person has his eyes in his head. And so, if we were to divide this room, if we were to divide us into two types of people, most of us kind of fall into one of two categories, and that's why I mentioned Luke 15, is we either fall into the prodigal son or we fall into the older brother. Meaning the prodigal son, some of us can relate to, right? Because we're wearing long sleeves because we want to cover up that tattoo that we're a little bit ashamed of. But when we think about our college experience, when we think about our past, when we think about the life that we've lived, we know what it is to have our head in the trough. But for some of us, we have no idea what that experience is like because we've spent our entire life crossing every T and dotting every I. That we're the obedient child who became the honor roll student, who graduated with honors, found the job, got married, and is trying to do all the right things in all the right ways. That's maybe even why you're tuned in this morning. It's because this is what we do. It's Sunday. And so we actually, when we talk about that life on a treadmill, we know exactly what we're talking about because we do the same things day in and day out. Mundane. No life, no joy. And so when we look at the first half of Ecclesiastes 2, we go, well, of course, life is meaningless for the guy who pursues folly, but for me, life should have meaning because I'm doing the right things and I'm doing them in the right ways. But yet, still there's something off, something missing. Because if I'm being honest, my life feels cold. It feels numb. Even sometimes in the quietness of my own heart, I would say that I envy them because they've at least experienced something. I feel like I've experienced nothing. And so what happens, check this out. Second half of verse 14, it says this. This is Ecclesiastes 2:14. The wise person has his eyes in his head, meaning that his eyes are open, but the fool walks in darkness. And yet I perceive that the same event happens to all of them, that we all are going to end up in the same exact place. So what is that place? Here's what he says next. It says, then I said in my heart, what happens to the fool will happen to me also. Why then have I been so very wise? I don't know if you've ever seen that movie or read that story or thought about those deathbed moments. But there's a realization that happens as you lay there. The realization is that the reality of life is that death comes to us all. It comes to the murderer and the martyr. But there's no separation, that at the end of the day, it is unavoidable. There is no autonomous zone we can create to get away from it. There is no euphoric state, utopia. There is no rebellion. There is no way that we can defeat it, no matter how many vitamins, how much spinach, how much of whatever. I don't want to offend any particular essential oil person, but anyways, no, I'm just kidding. My wife loves them. It's coming. This week that became really real to me. One of my absolute all-time mentors and a good friend of mine, his name's Kevin, back in Texas, that his wife and my wife are almost best friends, and she called this week, and all I can hear honestly on the phone is just sobbing. And we've been through kind of some fostering journeys together, and so I immediately assumed that that's probably what they were calling and talking about, is that they'd experienced some sort of fostering disappointment, and that yet again we were just going to spend some time praying with them. But in that, the disappointment almost went to another level, because Kevin's been diagnosed with a form of cancer that is not only painful but likely terminal. And we spent 24 hours going, really? Man, Kevin has come to know Jesus at a young age. He's been involved in ministry for over 30 years now. He's led one of the largest Christian camps in the entire country, and he's launched this ministry down there that's called the Mentoring Alliance, that in that it not only engages the poverty students and those that are struggling, but he heads up the Boys and Girls Club, that he's part of a teacher mentoring program, that he has done all these things, and in many ways he's the man that I would like to be. And now he's going to die. I mean, Ravi Zacharias just died. Tim Keller, one of my heroes of the faith, just got diagnosed with cancer. And now Kevin. And so probably like many of you, I don't know what to say. And I know that I'm a pastor, and so I'm supposed to have the book, right? Here's the things that you say in those moments. But there's nothing that really can be said in that moment where you find out how frail and fragile your life really is. And so I'm trying to think of some humorous story, some little quote I can give him, some sort of encouragement. And scrolling through my social media, I come to find this video. And it's Kevin making the announcement, hey, I've got cancer. And in it, he said something that was unbelievably profound. He said that somebody walked up to him and was acting really sorrowful, and Kevin, in a way that if you knew Kevin, you would know exactly the way that this would come across, looks at them and says, "Hey, don't act like we don't both have a death sentence." And it was this reminder to me that though I'm in my late 30s and though it appears that I've got all of life ahead of me, at any moment the Lord could take my life and eventually my life will be taken. That I will breathe my last breath. Maybe this season has reminded you of that. I mean, because some of us, and I want to encourage us in this way, we wear masks as an opportunity to not only serve from a health perspective, but just to serve from a mental health perspective, that it makes people sometimes feel more comfortable. But some of us wear them because we are reminded in this season of life how frail our life is. That we can get a phone call at any moment. That car can run that light at every single intersection. And so, death comes for us all. We all have the same sentence. For the wages of sin is death. And so here's what happens. Is I try to deny that, and the main way that I deny that is I deny it through control. I go, no, not me. Here's how I'm going to put it off. Here's how I'm going to figure it out. Here's how I'm going to get my life all in order because I'm type A, and so that's how I'm driven. So if I get my calendar going the right way, if I can get my diet in the right way, if I can make sure that I'm in the gym enough, if I can do the right things in the right way, at the end of the day, I can control my life because I feel this anxiety kind of well up that if I'm not going to give in to despair, then I'm going to try to wrap my arms around everything. And maybe you're like me, that you just kind of feel like if I try hard enough, if I work long enough, I can hold it all together. Except this is what you find, is control is an exhausting ambition, and it is an elusive deity. See, because it promises one thing and delivers another. It promises, hey, everything's going to be okay. All the while, killing you. Because you find out how weak and frail and out of control you are. And here's how out of control you are. Is look at the past 4 months. Every time that I have said this is as crazy as it's going to get, it gets a little crazier. Every time I've thought, like, literally, I want to go to this place, it's closed. Or I can't wear what I want to wear in it, or I can't say what I want to say in it, even down to the point that I can't hug people the way that I want to hug them. Like, I've warned Rob Maddox, as soon as this whole thing's over, I'm squeezing that dude, and I'm not letting him go. And so, we actually, when we come to the truth, we have such little control. But that's where the gospel is so amazing. Because it tells us in Corinthians that Jesus, when we can't hold all things together, he's the one who does. That he is the author and perfecter of our faith. That he has done what the flesh could not do. And so it's in this season when I feel totally out of control that I actually have the opportunity to find true, restful life in the one who has control. Because the only difference between me and a non-Christian isn't control, it's that we know who is in control. That instead of floundering like a fish out of the water, that I can flourish because at the end of the day, I know my God has me in mind. And so Solomon goes on, verse 18, says this. Verse 16, we'll start there. For of the wise as of the fool, there is no enduring remembrance, seeing that in the days to come, all we have longed for will be forgotten. How the wise dies just like the fool. So I hated life, because what was done under the sun was grievous to me, for all is vanity and striving after the wind. Truest of all books, right? Real men with real questions, with real problems, seeking a real God. If you are at this point, this is what I want to say to you. You're welcome. That one of the differences between the God of Christianity and every other God of every other false religion is every other false God says, you better not come in here with your junk. You better not come in here with your anger. You better not come in here and question me. And it's almost as if our loving Father allows us, welcomes us, that the Psalms are full of men and women going, what is going on? Because if we've got questions, we need to know where to go to find answers. So I hated all my toil in which I toil under the sun, seeing that I must leave it to the man who will come after me, and who knows whether he will be wise or a fool. Who are you going to leave it to? All that you've pursued, all that you've kind of put your life into, that house, that business, that church, if it's about you, how long does it take before it's forgotten? How long does it take till there's no remembrance of you? Till that which you built falls apart. Solomon's son was run out of Jerusalem. One generation. He goes on. This also is vanity. So I turned about and gave up my heart to despair all over the toil of my labors under the sun, because sometimes a person who has toiled with wisdom and knowledge and skill must leave everything to be enjoyed by someone who did not toil for it. I thought this was a dusty old book, not the story of 2020. What has a man from all the toil and striving of the heart with which he toils under the sun? For all his days are full of sorrow, and his work is a vexation. Even at night his heart does not rest. This is also vanity. This is the life that Jesus says, he who seeks to save his life, to control it, to bring all things together, to make a bigger name, to gather more, because more is the answer. New is the pursuit. There's got to be something else if I can just obtain it. But like we talked about last week, Matt Chandler says that the crazy is that we think that the meaning, that life is found in more of what we already have. That if that's the end, he who seeks to save his life will lose it. So what's the alternative? He who loses his life for my sake will find it. So it says this, verse 24. Luckily, as always, the story doesn't end there. There's nothing better for a person than he should eat and drink and find enjoyment in his toil. This also I saw is from the hand of God. I don't want it to be this way, but here's the honest truth, is oftentimes the reason are brought to the end of ourselves, the reason why our lack or illusion of control is exposed, the reason why we are shown for who we are is that God, instead of making us hide behind that tree in the garden, full of our shame, clothed in fig leaves, calls us out. He says, have you gotten to the point where you're willing to say, is this it? Because I'm willing to show you that it's not. That it's from my hand. That actually joy, life is found. And so he says, for apart from him, who can eat or who can have enjoyment? We talked about this in week 1, right? It's one thing to read about life. It's another thing to sit down and talk with somebody who's experienced life. To sit down with an athlete who has been in Memorial Stadium and heard the crowd and scored the touchdown, to hear them tell the story is very different than reading about it. Trust me, that's been the past year of my life. And so he says, sit down, listen to me, Solomon, because I'm the wisest, richest, and I've experienced the absolute most. And at the end of it, I can tell you, it's all vanity apart from God. See, because here's what we find, is that enjoyment isn't the purpose of life, but rather it's the path on which we walk with God. Enjoyment isn't the purpose, it's the path on which we walk with God. C.S. Lewis put it this way, that God desires to give us happiness. He just can't give it to us apart from himself. Jesus said this in Matthew 7, talking about this God that we wonder, what's he like? Does he want to hurt me? Does he want to punish me? He says this in Matthew 7. He says, ask and it will be given to you. Seek and you will find. Knock and it will be opened to you. That's where we're all at. Seeking, knocking, wondering. And the God of Christianity says, come knock at my door. I'm waiting for you. What God invites you. What God says, come to me, all you who labor and heavy burden, and I will not just give you rest. He actually says, I will rest you. I will put you in that place when you are at perfect peace. When all of life can be going crazy and you just kind of seem to be in this moment, not of just euphoria and denial of what's going on, fully aware of it and yet confident because I know who holds me in his hand and that there is nothing that can separate me from him. Nothing on this earth or nothing beyond it. That God who created everything holds me dear to his heart. But he goes on, for everyone who asks receives, and the one who finds, to the one who knocks, it will be opened. Or which of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks you for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father? Think about that. Jesus says, dresses God this way, as your Father. We just celebrated Father's Day a couple weeks ago, and I fictitiously said that all of this was for my 4 kids. That's actually not fictitious. I'm going to be honest. I was super young, handsome, had vibrant skin, then I had kids. But I have to tell you, there is nothing that brings me more joy than watching them experience joy. We went to Lake yesterday, and I got to ride on a tube with my daughter, and in it, it was the most hilarious thing. When I got off, I had been holding on really tight because I can't be that dad that falls off the raft. Like my kid can't stay on it. I have to stay on it, right? That's my own ego. Pray for me, I'll pray for you. But anyways, I'm holding on and I'm just flexing with everything I have, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, okay, I'm going to be so sore because in that, our elder that I'm not going to mention by name, but was driving the boat, seemed to just want to just push things a little bit more. And I would think in some ways he was trying to figure out whether or not I would be able to stand up here and preach today, right? And so in that, we just kept on going and kept on going and kept on going. But when I got off, Lynn asked me, are you sore? And I said, yes. My cheeks hurt. Because I was laughing and smiling so hard, listening to her laugh and smile. God says of Jesus when he comes out of the water being baptized, this is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And before you go, oh yeah, well that's Jesus. That's not me. Do you know what it says in Romans 8? It says that we are sons of God. It says that not only are we sons, not only are we children of God, but we are heirs and co-heirs with Christ. That when God looks at us, he sees Jesus. So when Jesus comes out of the water, when you come to know Christ, when you come to walk in the fullness of life with God, that he looks at you and says, this is my son, this is my daughter in whom I'm well pleased. That God's cheeks hurt smiling at his kids. That's our God. And if that's my God, then actually Christians should be the most joyful people in the entire world. Not the ones filled with the most angst and opinions, but the ones filled with the most love and grace. And so what does that look like? How do we respond? 3 things and we'll be done. Number 1, through confession and repentance. Confession and repentance, because at the end of the day, maybe we have, like Solomon, gotten to this point where we've pursued everything and we now go, what do we do? What's the speech that we give? And so David, a man who said that he is after God's own heart, a man that says that he loves the Bible, a man that's been to church, the king of Israel, who commits the ultimate sins, who sees a woman across a building naked and bathing and goes, you know what? I want her, bring her here. And the language there is a little bit vague, but we can at least assume that he uses power to manipulate her into sleeping with him. That they conceive a child out of wedlock, adultery. We find out that she's married, but not only married, she's married to the head of the army, Uriah, and he puts him at the front and says, that's how I'm going to have him killed, murdered. An adulteress, or an adulterer, a murderer, a man after God's own heart. How? After confronted by his friend Nathan, he says this. He says, have mercy on me, O God, according to your steadfast love. Not according to my performance, not according to how I've made up for it, not according to the reciprocity or the promises I'm going to make, but according to your steadfast love, according to your abundant mercy. Blot out my transgressions. Wash me thoroughly from my iniquity and cleanse me from my sin. Because I know my transgression, and my sin is ever before me, and against you and you alone have I sinned. At the end of the day, we sin against people, but ultimately we sin against the God who created us. But he doesn't end there. He says this, verse 7. Purge me with hyssop that I shall be clean. Wash me and I shall be whiter than snow. God can make you whiter than snow. I don't care how addicted you are. I don't care how evil you've been. I don't care how many tattoos of demons are all over your body. I don't care whether or not you're hungover this morning. God can wash you whiter than snow. Then he says this, listen to this request. Let me hear joy and gladness. Let the bones you have broken rejoice. Hide your face from my sins and blot out my iniquities. Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. Cast me not away from your presence, and take not your Holy Spirit from me. Restore to me the joy of my salvation. Friend, I know that shame trots out, and in fact, Bob Goff puts it this way, that fear and shame constantly call out our mistakes, constantly remind us of our deficiencies, that when we read, my sin is ever before me, we go, that's actually the truest thing that you've said this morning, because I know all the ways I am broken. I know all the ways I've lost it. In fact, this week I saw this hilarious thing that I actually resonated with. It was this dad joke, and it said, listen, yes, I yell at my kids, but they started it. I've yelled at my kids. I've said words that later on my 4-year-old has said that I've had to be like, I don't know where you heard that TV. I've got a laundry list. So do you. But Charles Spurgeon said this. He said, God is more ready to forgive than I'm ready to offend. Paul puts it slightly better. He says that where sin abounds, grace abounds all the more. And for some of us that are religious, that makes us uncomfortable. But God's grace is sufficient for my weakness. His love covers a multitude of sins, and His mercy is new every morning. Number 2, we find purpose in His presence. You can look for it in all kinds of other places, but at the end of the day, Psalm 16:11 tells us this, that the fullness of joy is only found in the presence of God. There are a lot of things I lament about this season. There's a lot of things I miss, and one of them's you. But you know what I've loved? I've loved that I don't have to rush out of the door in the morning. I've loved that I can sit not just with a warm cup of coffee and not just with birds chirping, but I can sit in the presence of God, in his scriptures, in his prayer, and that I can hear him and experience him in a new way. Because for many of us, maybe what we've actually found, what your life needs or needed was a little bit of a release. That God, you find, seeks communion with you over you performing with him, for him. And so, friend, let me ask you this. What in your life needs to be released? That as we get back to normal, that we don't just rush back into as many Little League games as we can be a part of, as many social engagements as we can fill the calendar with, that at the end of the day, we're just trying to drown out that gnawing feeling that this isn't enough. But instead, we slow down and realize that our kid may not get that scholarship and probably isn't going pro. And so there needs to be something beyond building a name on the side of a building. And we find that God actually speaks more in the silence and the solitude than he does the noise and the busy. Lastly, is if Christians are supposed to be the most joyful people on earth, if we're going to pray that prayer, then maybe we should be also a person of peace and not just position. That Colossians 2, 4 through 6, I don't have time to read it all to us this morning, but it says simply this. Paul asked the church at Colossae to pray for him that he might know how to act wisely with outsiders and that his words might be seasoned with grace. My words are most often seeking to put people in their place, to divide and devour, which is exactly anti what the Bible tells me. It tells me that God rejoices when brothers dwell together in unity. And in fact, Jesus says this, which is a really difficult thing for me to hear, is blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called children of God. I don't know how many of us would be described that way. I don't know how many would describe me that way. But that's the way the first Christians were described in Antioch in the book of Acts. Antioch was this city that many have deemed or nicknamed all the world in one city. The ultimate melting pot. That means everybody from all different religions and all different backgrounds and all different walks of life and all different colors are all gathered in this same city. And do you know who stands out in the midst of this city that's filled with so much disagreement, so much differentiation, so much separation? Christians. That they were the ones that were bringing people together, that they were the ones that were hosting people in their homes, that they were the ones that were serving the sick and the needy, that at the end of the day, the government officials get together and go, what in the world is going on? Because these people seem to be a light on a hill. They seem to be salt that's flavoring the earth. They seem different. They remind me of somebody. Who is it? It's Jesus. And so the church at Antioch is the first place that they're called Christians. And so, friend, my question for you is who can you be a person of peace to? And not just on social media, but in actual real life. Because it's a lot easier to blast somebody's avatar than it is to sit with them. It's a lot easier to tweet out some statement than it is to listen. But at the end of the day, Jesus welcomed those that the world outcasted, the worst of the sinners, to the point that he himself was called a friend of sinners. Oh, may we be that. May we be deemed the most joyful, hospitable, gracious, kind people because we identify with Jesus, because we've experienced the same grace, the same love, the same patience, and the same forgiveness. God, thank you so much that life is more than this. And Father, that it's not only to come, but you offer it now. You say that now there's no condemnation. Now your Spirit dwells in us. Now we can know you, seek you, that we can see you but a glimpse in the mirror more fully day after day after day for all eternity. For your riches are innumerable and immeasurable, and that we get to press deeper into them, God, and not for just our own benefit, but that we get to actually find who you've made us to be, an image of the ultimate God. So, Father, we want to experience you this morning. We want you and ask you and beg you to wash us whiter than snow, to help us live as sons and daughters of the King, knowing that our dad owns the place. And so, Father, in that, Lord, that we don't have to walk in fear and anxiety and worry and wonder, but instead we can press into life, not just life in the way that we want it to be, not just for our own personal good, but that we can show that life to others. That if our faith is real, it's in a faith worth sharing. And so, Jesus, you are the Prince of Peace. Help us to be people of peace. Help us to relinquish our control and trust in you, because you are able and we're sent. And it's in your Son's name I pray. Amen. Have a great Sunday.